time. So we look forward to that. So forward to that. Thank you so much. I could almost feel intimidated a little bit talking about guidance today, and I have a well-known psychic and medium in the audience. So, boy, that'll keep me on my P's and Q's, won't it? Talking about things I know about. I love the daily word this morning. It besides the music, that was wonderful. Thank you. Everything this morning has been magical. What a wonderful time and what a wonderful place. And doesn't it feel good to be here? I'm going to talk about that in a moment, how your guidance, if you're on the right path, you'll feel it, you'll know it, you'll have that gut instinct. We have an internal navigational system built in. And sometimes we misread it because we have distorted thoughts, right? Because our thoughts produce our beliefs, and many times it's our beliefs that will inform us how we want to feel. So we need to question our thoughts and make certain they're not distorted. The daily word said, divine wisdom helps me discover my unique spiritual path. Tending to my spiritual life keeps me attentive to the whispers of my heart and in tune with my guidance. Isn't that beautiful? What are some of the things that can keep us off that path, though, and we get misguided? I mentioned that sometimes we can have distorted thoughts. We can, unfortunately. Richard Carlson, who has now passed, he was a psychologist and well-known spiritual teacher. He wrote, "You can be happy no matter what." And he talked about 5 principles in his little book, and one was the principle of feeling. And he said just what I did a moment ago, and that is that we have a built-in navigational system, internal navigational system, and it's our feeling. And how we feel will guide us generally. Now, here's the glitch with that. If we have allowed our thoughts to become distorted, if we're following some path of fear, then our feelings may be off a bit. I know there's so much confusion going on in the world right now, and there are just a lot of people that would love to have guidance. They've got all sorts of things going on in their lives. They think of Moses and the burning bush, and they'll think, why can't I have a burning bush? Why can't I have a few words fly across the sky for me to know what I should do right now? Even a fortune cookie tells you to learn Chinese. Anybody had times like that in their lives where they don't feel like they could ever get divine guidance, and if they did, they wouldn't trust it. They wouldn't trust it. Well, trust comes from practicing the presence. And practicing the presence is being in the presence of God. Charles and I were talking about that this morning, how the more you practice going within, it becomes so natural that you can be in a crowded room and you can go within for a moment and you can find that peace that comes only from your higher power, God, the source, whatever your religious training has told you to call this energy, this love, this light. Practice, practice, practice. That's the way we get better at everything, isn't it? I mentioned this week that my husband had gotten sick sort of midweek. It came on all of a sudden. He turns out he did have a sinus infection, but with everything going on in the world, Tuesday night and Wednesday morning when he wasn't feeling well and his fever went up, and you couldn't find a place at a clinic. They said they were booked 4 hours in advance, Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning. And we finally got him in, and thank God the COVID test was negative, and then he did have the other one, and the flu test too. And then he did have the second one, the PCR, that takes longer, just to be certain. We wanted to be certain, because if I'm going to be out and around other people, I'm going to make certain I don't have anything. So, but here's the thing about it, and he is better, by the way, getting better all the time. The antibiotics are really working. But here's the thing about it. When it first came up, and he wasn't feeling well, and I'd go within, and I'd hear a voice. I'm questioning myself, no, it's not COVID, it's negative. I kept hearing that, and I kept hearing that. And even when it looked like with appearances, and they even told him at the clinic, you sure do have the same symptoms, and we know this is negative, but we're just not sure. And I went within and asked for guidance. No, it's negative. And didn't get the results from the second one till actually yesterday, but I was still quite certain it was going to be negative. But trust me, if we hadn't gotten that test, I wouldn't be here today, okay? Because I was going to get positive feedback here, the physical kind, not just telling you, no, I got a note from God. He said it was... you needed confirmation of that. But how did I know? How did I know? I've practiced, and I've practiced, and I've practiced the presence of God. I practice it all the time. Many, many years ago, when I changed careers and I was still in the corporate world, and I've told you I couldn't stand it any longer, not 1 minute longer. When I resigned from that, I walked away. For the 90 days I had given them advance notice, I was counting down not only the days, but the minutes. That's how exasperated I was with that. It was time for me to move on. You know it when it's time to move on. And all I wanted was peace and quiet. I wanted peace and quiet, peace and quiet. And in the morning, I would get up an hour early to make sure I was the only one in the house. And I'd sit in the quiet. And I do that now. It's my practice. It's what I do. I sit in the quiet. Now, we may call it several different things. You could call it prayer. Yes, I'm praying too while I'm there in the quiet, and I'm offering up everyone that I know that needs love and energy coming their way. And I also sit and practice the presence. And Brother Lawrence was a little Catholic monk, and he wrote a little book, I don't know how many years ago, about practicing the presence. And the fact is, he practiced the presence while he was washing dishes. He washed the dishes there at his monastery. And as he's washing dishes, he's practicing the presence. And Jesus told us, and every wisdom teacher that's ever lived upon this earth has told us, that we can receive supreme guidance, we can receive light, we can receive wisdom, we can receive whatever it is we need, but we must be open. Why did Jesus say you must be like a little child? It's because we must let go of what we already know and be willing. Even people on the spiritual path can become very arrogant that their way is the only way. And arrogance is one of the things you are never going to take with you into the kingdom. I guarantee you. You're going to have to leave it behind. It's like the spiritual seeker that had his mind so made up he was going to climb this mountain and get to this one place where he had been told a wisdom teacher resided. Climbed all the way up there, got the shack, knocked on the door, and a mild little guy opened the door. Oh, well, he must just be, he must work for the master, he assumed. So he disregarded him, walked in, looking for the master everywhere. Couldn't find him. Finally walks out the back door. And the master was the one that allowed him in. But he was so arrogant, he couldn't see that. Our arrogance will take us nowhere. Nowhere. And we have a lot of arrogance going on right now in the world, don't we? And so many rights and so many wrongs. And I've determined I'm not going to try to make anyone else wrong. I'm just going to feel in my gut what is mine to do, what is mine to know. I had someone that sent me a sweet note the other day, and she sent me an article, and it was quite controversial, but I know that she sent it to me out of the kindness of her heart because she cared for me. I read a little bit of it, and then I decided to do a little research about the person in the video that was spouting all this newfound knowledge. Come to find out, he at one time did have some expertise, but now he's gone down a dark path. So I did my research. I checked with my gut. I asked for guidance and said, nah, you know what, that's not for me. But that's okay. I didn't say a word. I sent her a note back and said, thank you. I appreciate that you care for me. We don't need to argue. I'm saying to myself, we don't need to argue about this because I don't have any arrogance going here. I just know what's right for me. And I know what my right path is. How do you know? How do you know? Well, I think ego sometimes is loud. If you're wanting to know if you're listening to the ego, if you're listening to guidance, the ego can be very loud. And the ego needs to be right and make everyone else wrong. And if you're following your own navigational system and you release the need to be right, you're willing to allow God to come in, you're willing to relook at what it is you've believed, and you're willing to ask for wisdom and information to flow, you will receive it. You will receive it. But if you've already got your mind made up, it's not going to come in. Arrogance has no place in the spiritual world. That's why Jesus said, you must be like a little child. You must open up. You must be willing. You must be willing to see that there's magic before you can enter the kingdom of God. So, okay, if there aren't any fortune cookies that are going to tell us what we're supposed to do, how is it we're supposed to find wisdom and guidance? We're willing, we're open, we listen. And you can only listen if you've taken time. There was a woman that wrote a book called The Seven Whispers a few years ago, and I believe I mentioned it one time last summer. And in it, she said that we need to go at the pace of guidance. What would the pace of guidance be? If you're out speeding around, getting from one meeting to the next as fast as you can go, you think that's the speed of guidance or the pace of guidance? Probably not. I mentioned recently that we were, when you're in the business world, and maybe it's changed since I was there, I don't know, but you would go so fast and furiously from one meeting to the next. Well, I know in terms now, your consciousness can't change that quickly from one meeting to the next. You're still annoyed at what someone else just said. How can you be present here in this moment and listen if your mind is still in the past? Whether it's 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, or 30 years ago. You must be present. Go at a pace that allows you to listen, to slow down, and practice the presence. After I had resigned from that one job that was so stressful, and I traveled a lot. I had a lot of responsibility in meetings constantly, problems, you name it. And I was weary of that, and so I was taking some time to just decide what it was I wanted to do. It was during that time that I would spend in the quiet, and I've mentioned before that during that winter I had my inner pajamas and my outer pajamas, and I stayed in them all the time. I hardly went out of the house because it was my period of finding myself and what it was I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But I received a call from someone that I had been recommended to do some consulting work with a man that was starting a new company. And I thought, well, I can do that. You do still need income, even when you've quit your prior position. There are times we still need some prosperity coming in, right? So I agreed to do it, and I did it for a period of time, and it did not take me long to know this is not mine to do. The pace was so fast, and it was even worse than the job I had left. Even though I took it on as a consulting role, I decided to stay with it because I had agreed to help him set up every policy for the company, to get them set up corporately, federally, every kind of way to be set up to bring employees in, to set up those policies, how everything worked. And I was not going to leave until I had done that. But it was very difficult because he was a very demanding person and arrogant, difficult, put pressure on everybody. As a matter of fact, the motto of this one little gal that came in to be the receptionist said that the motto of the place ought to be, pick up your purse and run. Has anybody ever been in a place like that? And there were even biblical scriptures on the walls of how we were going to work in an ethical manner. Scriptures, how we would treat each other. I know this same person said he ought to rip those off the wall and throw them out the window. But if you're the person, you don't see that. And there's a lot of that still going on in the world. And it troubles me a bit sometimes, but then I know that that's not mine to do. And another woman that I came across at St. Mary's when I was in a graduate program there, she was the director of the program on consciousness and nature studies, one of the best programs I've ever done. But she was also a psychologist, but she had been a sister all of her adult life with the Sisters of Providence. But those little women, I tell you what, they'd surprise you. Wow, they are spiritually attuned and wanting to change the world. But I remember she had a PhD in psychology. I remember her telling us, now, when you start this program, we want to remind you that you must choose your one little place in the world that you can do something about, and do that. And it doesn't mean you don't care about all the other problems. You do, and you're going to pray for those. But if they're not yours, you must not keep them in mind all the time, because it will shut you down, and then you will not be able to do the work that is yours to do. So I guess what I would remind you of this morning in obtaining your own guidance is to listen, be willing, be open, pay attention to your gut and not your head sometimes. Your gut will usually tell you when you're getting into something that is not yours to do. Pray. Practice the presence all the time. Everybody needs alone time. I don't care if you're married, you're single, you're an extrovert, an introvert. I don't care what your situation is. You need time in the quiet. And if you don't have it, you won't be able to hear the voice of God. So my hope for you is you'll be open and you'll listen. So have a good week. Thank you for your time.